What is up, everybody? We've had our first full week in Tears of the Kingdom, so it's time to talk about those first steps into Hyrule in more than 6 years. I'm joined today by my good friends and GVG co-hosts and co-founders, Daniel Alba, our art director, and John Cartwright, my fellow co-founder. We're going to talk about what it's like to be back in Hyrule after all this time away. You guys have heard my impressions of Tears of the Kingdom in a couple of different ways here on the channel. If you haven't watched John's recent spate of Zelda videos, they're all great. He figured out how to pet the dog. So yeah, it's good stuff. But today we want to talk about how we're liking the game so far, what we're finding, any potential missteps we've seen. But we're going to try to remain spoiler free. Like I said, you've heard plenty of my thoughts, so I want to go ahead and start with Daniel, because we haven't heard a whole ton from you yet, my friend. How have you been enjoying returning to Hyrule?
Yeah, we really just kind of went on hibernation this entire weekend. I've heard nothing from so many of us.
We were dead silent, yeah.
But yeah, mostly because we've just been exploring this vast new expanse of Hyrule this time around, and jumping into the first starting tutorial area, I was thinking that this is going to be something special right off the bat. You leap right off and you see like everything below you, and just that free falling into the first area, it feels so like freeing and huge. You look around and there's just, you see it in trailers of course, but then you see just how expansive everything is. And you're only in these islands to start with. It was so nice to jump back and kind of just, I know the whole thing with the story is that you're kind of back at square one, which we'll probably talk about that at a certain point, but being able to walk around in Hyrule, like Skyrule basically right now.
Skyrule.
That's good.
And it feels nice. It feels so good. There's a lot here to be taken, there's so much to talk about essentially. Like where can we even start with all this that we can see here? But first impressions were fantastic. Like, I love the area that we start out in. I can't believe all we were hyped up about with Aonuma showing us was just the tutorial area the entire time. I'm just like, This is huge. But it's essentially your Great Plateau, and you earn your first abilities in this area. And I slowly, it's a nice tutorial area. They kind of guide you a bit more than in the Great Plateau. Like, you're kind of guided along these islands a bit more.
I'd say a lot more than the Great Plateau.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tutorialization in general. Like, Breath of the Wild would often just sort of leave you to learn the mechanics. Whereas Tears of the Kingdom, a lot of times in text boxes, they're like, here's how you lock onto things, here's how you do parries, here's how you attack. I didn't actually love all that stuff. I thought as the game went on and became more open, I found a new appreciation, and I can rave all day long about how much I love it. But with the intro, I thought the Sky Island's beautiful. I love all the new mechanics. They teach it very well. It feels very linear in a way that kind of doesn't quite make sense with Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom's flow, in my opinion. But as I was saying to Steve earlier, all my misgivings with the intro are kind of a tiny speck in the greater Tears of the Kingdom experience. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying that I don't think it's quite Great Plateau level.
Yeah, I agree with that. We, like you said, John, we were talking about it a little bit before we started recording. I think that the intro hangs on a bit longer than it needs to. And you summed it up really well in a tweet talking about how it lacks the sense of immediacy. And I agree with that because I think the moment in which Link emerges from the Shrine of Resurrection in Breath of the Wild and you just walk out and there's nothing after that. You don't have to talk to the old man. You could just walk right past him if you felt like being antisocial and start figuring things out on your own. Whereas there is a lot more hand-holding that I think goes on within Tears of the Kingdom's opening moments. One thing that I think it does insanely well, and far better than Breath of the Wild, is setting up the main antagonist in the very beginning. You get a true sense of the nature of the threat that's posed to Hyrule right at the start. But then, you do kind of settle into this more down-tempo pace for the beginning moments of the game, in which you have a lot to explore, and there's definitely a lot to chew on there. For instance, I did not find Link's shirt for the longest time.
Oh yeah, you find the trousers or the skirt even, and then you're shirtless for like 2 hours. Yeah.
I was like, while you're falling, I'm like, did I forget up there? Because I have the trousers part, but not the actual toga. And I'm just like, did I? Oh god, did I miss out on that as I'm falling?
Yeah.
And like, I can criticize some of the pacing or the lack of immediacy, but there is a lot more to teach here. These mechanics, like each mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom could be its own game. You can make a mechanic around Ascension, a mechanic around the Ultra Hand. Everything literally could carry an 80-hour, 100-hour experience, but the fact that it's all merged in here, and they have to teach them all, I don't envy that. I'm just saying I don't think it quite reaches the same sort of just be free, find your own path kind of way. And I know you can still get a vehicle and glide around the islands and find your own way around, but it feels a lot more like, oh, you should be going over here, which Breath of the Wild never had.
Right. I agree with that. I feel like one of the things... I wonder if maybe the thought was that they didn't want you to just know how these work. They wanted you to start thinking about them in the abstract. Because you have to use all of these abilities in such creative ways in order to succeed within the game. Once you're on the ground, once you've left the tutorial area, they want you to start thinking about, you know, the things you can build with Ultra Hand or the practical applications of Ascension and stuff like that. And there were a few that didn't click for me right away. Ultra Hand can be a bit finicky, especially with rotation.
Yeah, it took me a while to really get my head around how to even get things diagonal. Yeah.
Exactly. But Daniel, how did you find the abilities working for you?
I thought they were working, as you said, they were a bit abstract at first. I was like, how do you even how to fathom how to put this together? But as we saw, like in the demonstration, the raft is one of the first things that you build, and it's like, oh, that's something that everyone can kind of like put together in their mind. Some logs, a sail, and then just put it in the water, and there you go. But then from there, they start to like deviate from that a little bit more. So like you have the minecart on the rails, and then like how do you propel it forward? There's a fan nearby, you stick that on there, like just things that kind of make sense to you. And then they start to kind of bend that in a certain way where like you have the hook, and the hook can be used in different way. We didn't see that at all. The one with the 2 rails, but then one rail's broken off, and then they have you figure it out for yourself, like what's the different way that you can do this. And I've heard different ways that you can solve it. I'm wondering which way you guys solved that problem.
Yeah, so in my instance, and I don't think we're getting too spoilery here, but I saw the gap as kind of a guide for where to place the hook. So I was like, oh, there's a hole in this rail that's just enough for me to get a hook into it. So then I visualized like, okay, if I put a hook on a minecart and hang the minecart like an ornament from a Christmas tree, and then it slides down, I'm like, okay, I need a fan. And so I kind of did it that way, but I've had the benefit of some of my friends being in town to play with me. And so we've been taking turns, like, you know, one of us is on the TV and one of us is playing handheld. And I watched him approach the same thing with just what in my mind was the most over-engineered solution of all time. Like, he had a couple hooks and a couple carts, and he stood on top of them. And I was like, that's a lot, but it worked. It worked just as well as mine did.
That's the best thing, when you put something completely off the walls together and it just works. I don't think I've made anything too out there in this game. I've seen people making mechs online, but the best thing I've done is like a boat that spins fire. And I thought there's no way this is going to float. So I put on some of those things that sort of keep them balanced upright, and a few other little bits just to sort of balance everything out. And when I finally like tested that boat out and it did work, I was like, this is bonkers. And my friend Robin made a 2-stage rocket where, like, you know, when you fly up with a hot air balloon, eventually they will just sort of pop. Like, you can't do it forever. The way she did it was she had a hot air balloon on one platform, and then she stuck another platform on with rockets. And because it was on a different sort of suspension, when she turned on the machine, it wouldn't just all go on at once. So the balloons took her to a certain point, then she'd get on the next platform with the rockets, and then just almost like an actual rocket, where she would just then be completely divided from the first part. The second part falls to the ground, she just goes skyrocketing into the air, and it took her as like the tallest part of the game. It is nuts when you put something like that together and it actually works. You feel like a genius.
Yeah, there's not to speak too far ahead, but there are some areas later that they serve to teach you different ways to think about using Ultra Hand and to construct items. And I'm just like, I feel like I need a degree in order to use Ultra Hand sometimes because of the way that it's so complex and like my brain can't think in this many directions. But it's great that so many different ways or so many different of these puzzles can be solved in different ways. And engineering like your own 2-tiered rocket is like, that's the first time I've heard of that. But it's like
nuts.
the things that we can build from this is insanity.
And the amount, I mean, you're touching on this earlier, but the amount of solutions. Like, there's a lot of shrines in this game which have pretty clear set paths of what you're meant to do. But when you can just solve it in a completely different way, it feels really great. There was this one shrine which was about sort of balancing these pillars and then just sort of climbing up them. Instead, I just put a bunch of poles together and climbed up the poles, and that worked.
That was my exact solution to that exact shrine. I know the one you're talking about.
Stick some trees together, yeah.
Yeah. Usually building a bridge or sticking some poles together will work.
Yeah, I saw an article, I want to say it was on Kotaku or something, and it was like, Tears of the Kingdom players are defeating everything by making insanely long bridges.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know
that's
what,
how
I
you pet
have
the
done
dog.
that.
That's how you pet the dog. Put some weapons together and then spin them around. You can pet them.
To allay the dog's fear. Without going into spoiler territory, let me ask you all, how far do you think you are into the game currently?
I've done 3 of the main regional events, and a bulk of other stuff. So I feel like I'm pretty far in.
Nice. How about you, Daniel?
I've done a lot of exploring. I've only done one of the major regions, the Herbert region where the Ritos are. That's pretty much the only major region I've completed at this point. But I've explored a lot of above, on ground, and the other area.
We can't not talk about the other area. Maybe wait a little bit, but we've got to talk about it.
We'll get to that later on because I think it is a huge part of the game, literally. So I'm about, I don't know how many hours I'm in because I don't have my Switch handy, but I've completed all 4 of the regional quests, and I've unlocked all the Skyview towers because that was kind of my first thing. I wanted to see the whole map opened up, so a lot of my time in Hyrule has been spent just traveling between those because they're hard to get to.
They are. They feel good too. Like in Breath of the Wild, a lot of the towers were just climbing. You just climb up them. There were a few that made like a few different kind of approaches, but these ones have like quests alongside them. One of my favorite ones was when you use like a set, like the doors are broken. There's no way of getting in. And you have to ascend from a cave to get in. It's so cool. You have to go underground into the cave and ascend upwards. That was such a cool use of traversal. That was amazing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it feels like, and I felt like I really enjoyed climbing in Breath of the Wild, but I'm starting to believe maybe I was in the minority because it feels like Tears of the Kingdom heavily de-emphasizes climbing.
I loved climbing in that game too. I think it's almost like a different change of pace, right? Like in Breath of the Wild, you are on foot at all times, pretty much at all times, and it's all about sort of getting to the top of the mountain and seeing a horizon of stuff. Whereas in Tears of the Kingdom, you're always in that horizon. You're always like in the sky. You're always being launched upwards. So there's not as much need to kind of hide things behind mountains anymore. But I do find like I didn't really upgrade my stamina meter much because I had no need to do that. I'm not really climbing much. So my hearts have been the primary upgrade this time.
Yeah. How about you, Daniel? How are you spending those blessings of light, I think it is the right word?
I have a second full stamina wheel. I got that fairly early on, and then at the detriment of having dangerously little health, but I figured I could just handle that well enough. But yeah, it feels like everything's a bit faster paced. Like before, I remember just slowly climbing up all the Sheikah towers. That took a long time. I was really over it by the time we were done with that. But this time, you just approach towers. A lot of them have a problem with them, unfortunately. A lot of them are out of order. You need to solve a problem around that. As you mentioned, there's a quest with them, or you need to find a unique way to activate them. But just being in them and just launching yourself to the sky, that's such a fun mechanic. Just that you can, at any point in these towers, just have a nice vantage point to access. If you see something in the distance, you can kind of just lean that way and kind of glide over there if you want to.
It's bonkers how different this world feels. Because it is reusing Hyrule. There have been changes, but there's part when I first landed in Hyrule, went to Hyrule Castle, and then just went, I think, west. I didn't recognize it, and I just did a playthrough of Breath of the Wild, and I didn't recognize the area just because it was so redesigned. But what really makes it different, though, is how you explore it. I'd say in this game, I sort of sporadically explore, whereas in Breath of the Wild, of course, because you're on the ground, you're exploring every nook and cranny. But here, you're going from place to place at a much quicker succession, and it makes the pacing radically different. It doesn't have the Heroes Trail feature that Breath of the Wild's DLC had, but if it did have that, I don't know how much of it would be on the ground.
It actually does have that feature.
I've not looked into that. Okay.
I will not tell you how you get that feature, but I found it
somewhere.
Yes,
okay.
It's out in the world somewhere if you explore.
Well, I haven't seen that yet, but I imagine it will mostly just be like everywhere, and I reckon there's no straight line. There's no straight line at all.
Mine is like a bunch of diagonals. Like I'm constantly making triangles when I turn on Hero's Path and I look at it. One thing I wanted to touch on that you said earlier, John, was that resonated with me. You mentioned that you spend so much time in the horizon, and then you further went on to say just how radically they've changed the world and how much different it feels. And I agree. I couldn't agree with that more, because I think, like you mentioned, in Breath of the Wild, it was more about, like you said, climbing up mountaintops and kind of taking a look over the horizon. Whereas this one, you're often presented with a top-down view of the world. You're looking at it from above, and the way in which the developers have given you incentive to find things off the beaten path is so different. And in particular, I find myself, I'm up in the sky, and I see a geoglyph, or I see a shrine, that little green glint off in the distance, and I'm like, oh, well, now I'm not doing what I was planning to do. I'm doing something completely different, and I'll find myself losing entire days to those things. Like I'll hop up into the sky and I'll just see, oh, there's like 3 shrines over here, and there's something interesting this way, and so I'll find myself more often having to, wanting to glide over to those things rather than what I had initially gone up for. And to kind of bring the point home, I ended up I did a lot of hearts, but now I've been upping my stamina meter, like Daniel implied, because I find myself like, oh, I can't glide all the way to some of these things I want to get, and I end up back on the ground. So I've been trying to push myself to be able to glide further and further, so that when I see something from way high up, no matter how far away it is, I can still reach it.
Yeah. When I first started playing, I'll admit, I was pretty vanilla. I was playing it as if it were Breath of the Wild. I got a horse out. I was just kind of walking around everywhere. And then I just thought, like, I'm not using my resources properly here. And then I started building stuff, building cars, building those gliders, putting, like, fans on them, and then just sort of building more abstract things like boats and an actual plane. And that's when it clicked that, God, this game is nuts. Whatever you think you can do, you can. And it doesn't feel like it should be real, this game. Of course, they're reusing a lot of the base of Breath of the Wild to do that, but it is so mechanically sound and ingenious at all times. It is such a pioneer for what open worlds can be and should be, that it's almost unbelievable that they've achieved this and made it as polished as it is. And there is just so much to see. We've been in this world before, but it still feels like a brand new surprise at every corner. Whether it's a new enemy, whether it is a cave, whatever it is. I'm actually in disbelief at how good this game is. I know it's like slandering the beginning at the start, but that means so little once you get in that world. It is remarkably good.
Right. One of the things that I think is really interesting too, you started to touch on it a bit. It's this game is running on 8-year-old hardware.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. It performs very similarly to Breath of the Wild, in my experience. Have you guys had any issues with like slowdown or anything?
Minor. Like, it goes away very quick.
There's been some times, like, when there's a lot of effects just happening at once, that's usually just a little bit of slowdown, but it's nothing that I can say was super distracting or anything.
Right.
One problem Breath of the Wild's engine had, and this is so rare that it doesn't really come up with in normal gameplay, But sometimes if you're going really fast, it will just kind of stop. Like if you're on the master cycle, sometimes when you go fast, like too fast for the game, it just pauses for like 3 seconds. You can see that in speedruns a ton, when they do like a stasis jump and it just flies across the map and the game has to stop. Like that stuff wouldn't happen usually. But here, it very rarely. I've had it happen twice, I think, and that's when going like extremely fast. But you can be gliding through the sky, you can be skydiving down, and it will not stop. I don't know how they made this happen, especially on a tablet.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that's kind of what impresses me most. I don't know about you guys, but I've been playing, I would say almost 50-50, handheld and docked currently. What about you guys?
Mostly handheld. It's been hard to get like TV time with my daughter, so I mostly like just sit on the sofa and play whenever I can in handheld.
Yeah, nearly exclusively on TV for me.
Nice.
Which is bananas because I have a new Zelda Switch OLED, but still.
Yeah, I've been playing on my new OLED. I haven't even opened my controller yet. I bought it and I haven't wanted to peel away from the game long enough to open it. But what I find really remarkable about this is that it maintains a similar level of performance to the original Breath of the Wild with a massively different, larger open world. And like you said, John, with so many physics interactions going on with Ultra Hand, when you're building stuff, those are all like calculations. And I will say that the bulk of the slowdown I've seen is when I'm moving things around with Ultra Hand, but just the fact that you can do that is remarkable. And I've seen a lot of game devs commenting on just how insane the technology behind this game is. People from Naughty Dog and stuff being like, how does this exist?
Yeah. And Ascend should be glitchy as heck. It should be making you go through the world, be getting stuck in a wall. It never breaks. I don't know how.
Yeah, it's wild to me. So without going into too much detail, in one of the regional missions, there was a whole lot of verticality to the map, and it was driving me nuts. Like, I just wasn't having a good time anymore. And out of frustration, I was like, I'm just going to climb the outside of it and use Ascend to get as high as I can. I was able to get to the very top of this map, and I was like using Ascend on like little bits of corners and weird places where you probably shouldn't. And I fully expected Link to eventually like pop out of a wall and go flying off, and it worked every time, like the way you would expect it to. And
Recall is stupidly clever too. Like, I can't imagine how you code that. Every single object in the game, like, all its data is tracked at all times. If you've moved it, you can keep tracking it. I saw a really great exploit where if you attach like a bit of wood to something and shoot it in the air with an arrow, as it comes down, you can like attach something to it, recall it, stand on the platform that you've attached to it, and you'll go up with it. So it's almost like one of those stasis exploits. But the fact that it can track that is bonkers. And it's great in the sky too. Like if something falls down, you can quickly like, oh no, gotta recall, and just bring it back rather than like losing it forever. By the way, muscle memory is kicking my ass with this game. I keep holding up on the D-pad to change my abilities, like Breath of the Wild. I so rarely hold down L and get it right the first time. I'm always pressing up on the D-pad.
Yeah, I find myself doing that too. Because just like you, I played Breath of the Wild maybe 2 weeks ago before the game came out, just to give myself a fresh look at the game before then. And the controls are definitely something, probably my biggest pain point, just in terms of the fact that, like you said, I'm used to the mappings from Breath of the Wild, and they've changed ever so slightly, so I end up pushing the wrong thing a lot. Or one of my favorites is that I will go to Ascend, and I don't know why, but I will mash B instead of A to get out of it, and so I'll have to redo it. But Daniel, how are you finding the controls?
Yeah, I'm kind of fumbling through menus still. Like I try to open one thing and there's my items, or I try to pull out my shield. To change my shield because one of them has like a flamethrower on it, but I have my weapon instead. That's probably the same from Breath of the Wild at that point, but yeah, I think I'm the kind of person that doesn't change like my jump and my run button. I kind of just leave that at default.
Yeah,
but everything else, it's just me trying to figure out again. Like, yeah, I'm still coded to the way Breath of the Wild handled the Sheikah runes. But I'm slowly getting used to it. I think the major hurdle is just trying to figure out at times how Ultra Hand works when you're aligning and repositioning and spinning things around and making sure that it doesn't just go flying if I hit it the wrong way. Yeah. But otherwise, yeah, I think controls are working fairly well. Like it feels like it should be too complicated, but it's not. It all kind of makes sense with only one or two button presses, and that's fantastic.
You talked a little bit there about merging weapons and stuff and putting things on your shield. When they showed that off in the showcase demo, that's when it clicked to me why this game is special. Because that must have taken so much time to put together. And when you are in practice, it's remarkable. It's so cool. Like, in Breath of the Wild, I so rarely used my resources. I used, like, the Guardian screws just to fuel my Master Cycle. I never really used it for much else. Because once you've got what you need, there's no need to use that stuff. A lot of the monster parts I rarely used. But now, it's all just part of your inventory. You're always using it in combat. And it's so cool to experiment with weapons. Even putting a mushroom on a spear makes it bouncy, so you can just prod things off a cliff rather than fighting them. I love putting a rocket on your shield. It's basically Revali's Gale. You can just go in the air. There's so many cool things that you can put together. And like as I was saying, like this could have been a mechanic to carry another game through, but it's just a small pillar of Tears of the Kingdom.
Weapon fusion is so critical to the level of difficulty within the game. Like if you're not using it properly, you're gonna have a way harder time. Like my first few hours in the game, I was just fusing whatever. Like I would fuse, a sword with like a box that I found, or whatever I could find. And that definitely was not the way. I started to learn very quickly, when I started to face more stiff challenges, when Bokoblins changed from, red to blue to black, I started to have to actually learn this system, because if you go in with, all the weapons in the world are decayed, so they're much weaker than they were in Breath of the Wild. And you have to find materials that work for you in order to actually effectively deal damage. And I was really into this because, like you said, John, anything you find works. Like there's a shrine that I found that had a buoy in it, like a big yellow bouncy ball. And I didn't think to use it, but my friend went through and she did. She attached it to a spear, and then she went into a fight, and she was sending enemies just rocketing off into the sunset when she would hit them with it. And so it's really cool to see just kind of the practical applications of it and what you can do with all this stuff. I will say, as much as I like shield and weapon fusion, I find myself using fused arrows way, way, way more than anything else.
I do too. Absolutely. Yeah. This isn't really a spoiler because we saw it in the trailer, but there's a low gravity area, and I put a spring on my shield in that area and bounced so high into the air. This is one of the points where the game froze for like a second, like Breath of the Wild sometimes did. But you go so fast and so high that I bypassed everything in that area and went straight to the top. That was nuts, but that felt so good to do though.
Did you do that by shield surfing with a spring on?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so crazy. I never would have considered that.
I've seen people complaining like, oh, where's Revali's Gale? I miss it. I don't miss it. You've got so many alternatives to Revali's Gale.
There's so many options, and there's so many different things you can do. Crazy stuff with the shield. You can attach the minecart to it, and you can go skateboarding on your shield instead.
Oh, you can?
You can.
Man.
It's so dumb, and I love it. These applications.
They've put all of Breath of the Wild's runes in here in a kind of different way. Like, bombs are now just items. And by the way, I love bomb arrows. I know bomb arrows were in Breath of the Wild, but I think because they had different arrow categories, you're always quite low on most arrows. Whereas in this game, they just give you one type of arrows, so you always have a ton of them. And you can choose whether it's a bomb, whether it's a monster eye. That works better for me.
Oh, yeah.
Cryonis is in here too. You can throw an icy thing into a pond. You can just forge that with your sword, and all of a sudden you can make blocks of ice with whatever weapon you have. I guess the Ultra Hand is Magnesis. Stasis is the only one that's not really there, but I'd say that Recall is basically the evolution of Stasis.
Yeah, Recall is insanely useful too. As I was exploring the world, I would often just pop it to see what could be moved back in time, because the range on it is huge.
It's nuts. Yeah.
You could be on a mountain and just see something that can be recalled off in the horizon and make your way to it. And often when I had long climbs ahead of me, that would be how I decided which direction I was going. There's a rock I can recall over there. That may help.
It's a great way to launch those little glider planes too, because if you don't have a surface to sort of launch them off, it can be quite hard to actually get them going. But if you use Ultra Hand to sort of put them in the air, and then use recall to put it back there, you can kind of jump onto it, and all of a sudden you're already in the air on those gliders, and you can just start flying.
Oh man, I never thought of that. I've used that same tactic with recall for other things, but I never thought to use it with a glider.
Yeah, it works. It's good.
All right, let's go around real. Oh, go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
Oh, that's just the reason why this game took 6 years. Is that
Yeah.
everything has a property, everything has something that can interact with something else, and how there's like layers of games within games with all these abilities, and it's just a marvel to look at and play around with.
I feel like a rich man playing this game. But it doesn't feel like it should be something for the common folk. It feels so premium. Everything about
absolutely. You know, the thing I find most interesting about this is, one, the level of QA effort had to have been insane on this. But I find that I'm just kind of stuck. Like, there's such a huge number of things you can do within this world that I often sometimes just get paralyzed. And I'm like, I don't know where to go or what to do next because there's so many choices I have. In fact, we're over 35 minutes into this discussion. There's a huge part of the map we haven't even discussed.
There's so much to say.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Go ahead.
So I think this is where we have to talk about it. So if you're still trying to stay blind to everything in Tears of the Kingdom, this is your official warning. We're about to talk about. It's not a story beat. It's just something that Nintendo didn't discuss pre-release.
And I'm so glad they didn't.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So for those of you that haven't clicked off, thanks for staying. We're talking about, of course, the depths, which I was not ready for. I was not expecting Hyrule to have, like, we talked about caves, and we talked about the potential of underground environments in the pre-release hype cycle for the game. But I was not prepared for there to basically be an entire other Hyrule underground.
No. Like we all kind of suspected there would be an underground world. Like in trailers, we've seen caves, so we all sort of thought like, okay, is there going to be a sky, an overworld, and an underground? And when I first started playing and found a cave for the first time, I was like, oh, so this is the underground? No, that's not the underground. That's another layer within this layer. But yeah, there's a flippin' world down there. The first chasm that I did, I didn't do the one that the story wants you to do. So it didn't teach me about keeping it illuminated down there. So I went down to some other chasm, and it was pitch dark. I fumbled around in the darkness. I didn't know how to light things up, and I went for maybe like half an hour in pitch dark, only using like a torch, like a fire weapon to kind of keep my environment lit. And I found this just horrific monster down there, which was way above what I should be fighting right now. But I managed to put materials on my weapons, like the best ones that I had, and finally took it down. And the stuff you find down there is nuts too. Like, even if you're not doing it for the story, there are amazing materials in the depths.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The first time that I descended into a chasm, I did do the one that they recommended because I managed to make my way to the lookout tower. And, if you talk to literally everybody, somebody will tell you to go there.
Yeah.
And I was not prepared for just how long the descent into the depths is. Like,
Yeah.
when you jump in that hole, you're gonna die if you don't have a glider. It's literally quite the same distance between the sky and the surface.
Yeah,
Then
and
again,
the map
to go-
has the mini-map has your coordinates on there too, and it's like minus, I don't know how much, like minus 100,000 or something. It's crazy.
Yeah, Daniel, I assume you've also explored the depths by now.
Oh yeah, we both went down in the same story beat area where they introduced the depths to you properly, and my God, they really said, hey, you want a cave? Here's the biggest cave in your entire life. Have fun with it. And it's terrifying when you're down there. I haven't felt this sense of dread and and discomfort in a Zelda game in a very long time, because it's actually very dark. It's pitch black unless you're using the plants to light your way. There's gloom just everywhere, so it's kind of affecting your traversal as well. And you're just, when you see the bulb, the tree to light your way, you're just like, please, just let me get over there without like 10 enemies popping out and trying to kill me, because your health has a different mechanic down there too.
Yeah. And speaking of trees, the first time I encountered a living tree was down
Right?
there.
Oh yeah.
Oh no!
Oh, down there.
Yeah, I was just walking by. I was in a place I believe called the Grove of Time, and I was like, "What a lovely name!" And I'm walking through these trees, and two of them just came to life and started trying to kill me.
It's the Evermean. I found the Evermean above ground. I'm just like, excuse me? Are you real right now?
The
It's just a
enemy
walking
variety is crazy in this game. That was one shortcoming of Breath of the Wild. Is basically just Lizalfos and Bokoblins the entire time. Whereas here, there's so many new enemy types. They all fight differently with their fused weapons as well. You get like old Zelda favorites back. Like likes are here. When I first
Yeah.
encountered that, I was like,
Yeah.
what?
We talked about that like days before the game came out. I was like, wouldn't that be funny because of how threatening they can be, stealing all your items away from you. They'd be an actual threat in this game, and there they were. They look disgusting.
Yeah, they are
there's some-
awful to look at.
Yeah, and there's some brand new enemies. I think they're exclusive to the depths, and they are these horrific, monstrous beasts. They're terrifying. I haven't seen anything like these in Zelda before. They are completely nuts.
Yeah, the depths in general are very unsettling, like uncharacteristically unsettling for Zelda. I don't enjoy being down there, but I mean that in a good way. Like it sets me on edge to know that I have to light my own way. And like Daniel said, you never know what's right ahead of you. There are times where I aim like I'm gonna throw a Bright Bloom seed as far as I can. I realize I'm right up against a wall, and it just hits like an inch in front of my face.
It's a different kind of exploration to the sky and the overworld. Because this isn't the kind of place you chill in. This isn't like, oh, I'm just gonna chill out in the depths. I'm gonna find some Koroks. It's not that. It's not that. It's more of just sort of forging a path through the darkness. But it is such a different feel that it's just an amazing change of pace to the other kind of exploration. It's so cool down there.
Yeah, even the sound, like when you descend into the depths, that horn is like so foreboding, and like it's the game letting you know, like, you're going to a place you don't want to stay in.
You're probably going to die.
Yeah. And just like Daniel said, like, it chips away at your health. Like, you take damage from an enemy down in the depths. Many of them are covered head to toe in gloom. And when they take a heart from you, that heart is gone until you return to the surface. Or if you have, of course, like food or other stuff that can mitigate the effects. But it very much feels like a battle for survival down there versus, like you said, John, kind of gleefully exploring a world.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you guys have defeated the hand enemy, but the reveal is bonkers.
Oh, there was a section where I was kind of just hanging on a ledge and chipping away at it. I was like, I can beat this because it can't reach me. And then I finally did kill it. And then I realized I didn't kill it, and I had a very bad time.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I encountered one somewhere else that I don't want to mention because I haven't finished it yet, and I feel like it's quite spoilery. If it turned out the way it turned out for me, for you guys, it's definitely a big spoiler.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I just I camped out on a ledge firing bomb arrows at the hands, and then I was not ready for what followed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was a sense of relief. I was like, oh my god, I got him. And then what happened
no, you
next?
didn't.
I was like, oh no. And I got out of there. I was like,
Yeah. Well, I left as fast as I could.
I took it on.
Did you win?
I did win. I died a few times, but I did win.
Oh,
And
man.
the reward is also nuts.
Oh man. Now I really have to try
Now
it.
I
So
gotta beat that thing.
yeah, where I encountered the hands, I think the whole thing, it's my favorite part of the game so far, and I wish I could discuss it, but the whole thing is a huge spoiler. But I absolutely have to go back and beat it because I'm pretty sure it's required. But I'm definitely interested to see where that goes. The hands alone, though, are a terrifying enemy. Like it's what, like 6 hands coming out. You have to kill them all, and then it transitions to its second phase, we'll say. And the second phase is even more daunting than the hands were.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah, just the sheer enemy variety is crazy. From that, the returning enemies, there's like a lot of new enemies, as we already mentioned. you're inside caves and there's like the Horriblins, which are freaky weird.
I
enemies. They're
love
just, like,
the Horriblins. They have such Wind Waker energy to them.
They
do.
Their audio too is very Wind Wakery.
Yeah,
very
well,
charismatic.
the thing I love is that, you know, the Horriblins, they skitter along the ceilings of things, which is unsettling. But when you hit them, in the face, they fall, and they just like they hurt their butt when they hit the ground, and they start bouncing around like Mario. And I found that to be it totally took the anxiety of facing them away from me. I was like, oh, they become somewhat cute when you hit them the right way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we we're talking earlier about how much stuff there is to do, whether it's the story or getting distracted or side quests or just exploring. But I found, like 25 hours in, I hadn't been to Kakariko Village or Hateno Village at all. Those were like the first places I went in Breath of the Wild. Whereas here, I went to the desert first, but I hadn't been to just sort of the more calmer towns. And I still haven't been to Hateno. I've been to Kakariko now, but there's still major parts of the world I haven't been to. And I feel like I've been going everywhere, but there's still massive amounts that I haven't seen.
The funny thing is, the tone in this world is so much different. Because there's actual civilization seemingly everywhere. And there are people, you know, Link feels like a part of a greater world in this game. Like, everybody knows who Link is now, which makes sense. You know, he saved the world just a few years ago. Yeah. But also, people want to help you on your path to unraveling the mysteries that exist in this world. Like, everybody seems to have some part to play in the larger narrative going on. You know, and one of my favorite things about this game is seeing how side characters have changed over the years. Yeah. Like, you know, I without going into what's happened to anybody, like, you know, I checked in on my favorite shopkeeper from Kakariko. I checked in on Tracy, who was leaving rumors all over stables everywhere. And it's just cool to see how their lives have changed. One of my first stops was Terrytown. And I just wanted to see. I loved
Terrytown. Yeah.
Yeah, Terrytown was so good, and I without going into any details, I had to go there and do all the side quests, and there is just such a tearjerker of a side quest for me. It hit me right in the feels really hard.
Yeah, if you remember something from Breath of the Wild, you will be rewarded for that thing. If it's just some minor side quest or minor character, they have an arc here. It's so. I think they assume you play Breath of the Wild going into this, even though it's quite heavily tutorialized in the beginning. I think it's probably intended for those who have played Breath of the Wild. It's not to say you have to have played it, but I think you get a better sense of reward if you have.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those games where like the community actually matters a lot more. Like it kind of reminds me of Majora's Mask in a sort of way, where the side characters are actually important to the world because they're all rebuilding this Hyrule that's been destroyed in the previous game. And you're watching the construction slowly come into fruition. And I love how it's contextualized with you as well, because there's these little sets of materials everywhere around the world, just kind of waiting there. If you can use them for a building if you want to, and it just all kind of flows together very naturally in this game.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it stems from a side character in Breath of the Wild. Like, it's all the I can't remember his name, the Sun Construction Company, the guy that looks suspiciously... Say what?
Bolson?
Yes.
Because he's
It's
not. I only know that name because that guy is always holding up the sign. I'm just like, man, you need to take a break.
Those puzzles are so fun though. Like, it's just such a silly little distraction. Like seeing that guy just holding up the sign, and it's always a weirdly built sign, and you have to find a unique way to fix each one. I end up getting so in the weeds on those.
That could have been its own game too. Like, I can totally see just a physics game about holding a sign up. I think that much of this game could be another thing. Those Korok puzzles where you've got to build something to get the little guy to his friend too, that they are so fun. In Breath of the Wild, I felt like Korok puzzles were more just about landmarks to distract you. Like, oh, those trees look funky, those rocks look weird. But here they are more integral. They still have those Korok puzzles, but a lot of them are more integral, and they feel more hands-on than Breath of the Wild ever had. And it's so weird to say that about Breath of the Wild, because like before now, that I would say that's my favorite game. I'd struggle to fault it, but it feels like an early beta to Tears of the Kingdom now. I think Breath of the Wild still has its own, charm and everything, but Tears is so far ahead in so many ways.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably a great way to summarize. I think that Tears of the Kingdom is clearly dramatically improved over Breath of the Wild, and that makes sense. They've had years to think about what did and didn't work, and there's clearly some places where they did little things to address issues that they found with the game later on, like opening a chest and being able to just drop what you have to take what's in the chest.
I was thinking that, yeah.
Being able to change what item you're throwing without having to, go through menus to find it. Just stuff like that is really smart, really intuitive design. But I agree that Tears of the Kingdom somehow simultaneously feels like an improvement on the original in every way, but also not a replacement for it. I don't think that Tears of the Kingdom will scratch that itch to play Breath of the Wild. You won't want to play that one. They still made enough changes to where it feels like a whole different experience rather than just a strictly improved one.
Yeah, you play it so differently. I mean, you can in Tears of the Kingdom, you can ignore all of the sky stuff. You can just walk around climbing mountains if you want to, but you're not going to. In Breath of the Wild, you are far more incentivized to play it that way. I think just the moment-to-moment gameplay and pacing is very different between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, I struggled to clearly none of us have finished the game, and I don't think we will for quite some time still. I mean, even once you roll the credits, there's going to be a lot more to do.
That's the tutorial once you roll the credits, and then there's the real game.
The whole point is the point of this game is not to beat it, it's just to explore and experience the world with this in particular.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So that being said, let's get some final thoughts from each of us. Daniel, we started with you, so we'll go back to you. Where do you think your opinion of the game is at right now?
It's very high. Like there's so many things that we can do in this game that I feel like we're going to be discovering for years to come. As we kind of still had people discovering things about Breath of the Wild leading up to Tears of the Kingdom, and now just imagine that tenfold with the mechanics you can do, the things you can discover, with how big this game is. It's a marvel. I can't believe that it's functioning as it is and as well as it does right now, and just very high praise for it. And just, I mean, it's only a tiny gripe, but man, starting all the way from zero again once you get Samus at the very beginning of the game, like, man, Link's stamina at the beginning, he sprints for 3 seconds and he's out of breath. He's just like me for real.
Yeah, I don't think I've played a better game in my life. I think this is simply astonishing. I've struggled to fault it. Outside of some gripes with the intro pacing, I have so little bad things to say about this game. I think it's just a miracle that it works the way it does, that it exists at all, and I think it's going to take a lot for developers to learn from this game. Because I think some developers are still learning from Breath of the Wild, not always in the right way, and it's going to be really interesting to see what they learn from Tears of the Kingdom and how long it's going to take them to reach that point. I don't know where you go from here. It just...
Yeah.
What does Zelda even possibly do next after this? I have no idea, but I struggle to put this into words, but I'm just over the moon with how much I love this game.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. Oh, sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
There's been years after Breath of the Wild, there's been a lot of open world attempts to see, like, oh, this feels like Breath of the Wild, this feels so Breath of the Wild. Now there's going to expect more games with crafting in them and other such mechanics, and be like, oh, this feels very Tears of the Kingdom. just waiting to happen.
Yeah.
I hope crafting isn't the lesson. Like crafting in this game is good, but I don't think that's what we should be learning from Tears of the Kingdom. Like, oh, let's put crafting and everything.
Yeah, I certainly hope not. But I do agree that, developers there's going to be at least one game that tries to lift that wholesale. And I take my hat off to anybody who can replicate it as well as Nintendo has here. Right now, I agree with you, John. It feels like one of, if not the best game I've ever played. I will say that the current generation of consoles has kind of spoiled me a bit. Like when I see a shrine open up and I see that little portal into it, I'm like, how cool would it be if you just walked in and that was the shrine and you could just walk back out? But obviously, what they've managed to pull off on nearly decade-old hardware is nothing short of impressive. the fact that you have devs that do work on those current gen consoles puzzling over how Nintendo did all this is a testament to just the level of technical wizardry on display here. But like you said, it's difficult to find fault. I do agree with the pacing issues in the beginning, but as you mentioned, it's a minuscule speck in
it won't matter.
the grand scheme of things. And once you're out in the world, I appreciate having kind of been handheld through all that training, because suddenly then it's just, hey, here's some boards and some wheels and some stuff and devices that you have to figure out how to make the best of. So fantastic game overall. Can't wait to keep playing. I'm going to start playing as soon as we're done recording here. And that's going to be the rest of my day.
There's a Tetris effect going on with this game right now where I see it. But if my eyes are closed, I see the HUD. I can't stop thinking about it. Last night I woke up like 3 times, and I was convinced I had been playing the game. I'd just been sleeping, but I was convinced that I had just this moment been playing Tears of the Kingdom. I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah, I've been in. You haven't been in pro mode, John?
I should be in pro mode.
We're like they in this game they actually make it like pro mode. They took all the HUD out. You don't even see your hearts anymore. You can see them in the brass game, but now you can't see anything unless you're getting hurt.
The lack of hearts gives me too much anxiety, because I will admit I live on the edge in this game. I'm like, I will not eat until Link is near death. So my poor man is starving over here. But I just tend to take it to the absolute limit of what I can survive. And pro mode is just, it's a step too far. Plus the map, I need the map. I look at it, I'm just not familiar enough with this version of Hyrule to where I can navigate it with confidence. And so I've been, just running around doing everything. One thing, I do want to bring up one little gripe before we sign off. Sure. I don't love the map being an ability on the L button, because when I select it
that's
for
weird.
the wrong reason, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, just press minus.
Sticks out.
Why is it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I hit L and then I try to change it and I don't hold L long enough, and then I'm in the map again. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, I applaud trying something new, but it definitely didn't work for me. But again, a very, very minuscule complaint in a game full of outrageously positive things. So, loving it so far. Going to be hard to top this for me for Game of the Year. This is, I don't know how you come out ahead of this. I'm excited to see what other developers are doing, but I feel for them at the same time.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it feels like there's no contest. We can still give our acclaims like Best Fighting Game, Street Fighter, whatever else, but overall Game of the Year, I cannot see it being anything else but this.
Yep.
Yeah, no way.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us for today. We've managed to talk about it for an hour with staying as far away from the story of it as we can.
And there's still so much we could be saying.
There'll be a lot more to talk about in the future, but
exactly.
As right now,
I think once some more time has passed, we'll do a more story focused discussion once we've gotten through the game, and once many of you watching or listening have gotten through the game, when it's safe to discuss. But we'll have a spoiler heavy discussion later on the channel once we've all been able to sink our teeth into the game and sit with it for a bit, because I'm sure it'll give us plenty to think about. But there's still so many mysteries for us to uncover, so much stuff for us to do, that we'll be probably talking about this game for months, if not years to come. But that'll do it for us for this discussion on Tears of the Kingdom after our first weekend with the game. Thank you all so much for listening. If you'd like to support us, these things are only possible thanks to your generous support. Head over to patreon.com/gvgaming to find out how you can join our community on Patreon. We do a ton of stuff over there, from giveaways to exclusive videos entirely. So check those out if you're interested in more stuff. But that's it for us for today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time, folks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Till we meet again.